Hello, everybody. How's it going? Welcome back to Fishing with Crendor. It's me, Crendor, and today I'm here with Kevin Jordan. Why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do, Kevin?
Hello. Thanks for having me, Crendor.
No problem.
Nice to be here. My name's Kevin Jordan. I'm one of the original three full time game designers for Vanilla World of Warcraft.
So, what specifically did you work on in Vanilla World of Warcraft?
So at the very beginning, we had a lot of sort of foundation design to do, and I was part of that, kind of discussing each system and how it would fit with the others and what kind of game we wanted and how we were going to be different from the competition and et cetera, et cetera. So I was part of that. And then more specifically, as time wore on, and the details of each of those systems had to be fleshed out, I fell into character classes and the talent system and talents. So that became sort of my primary focus for the original 9 classes.
Oh, interesting. I got a lot of questions about that then.
All right.
Um, as I should. I would hope I have questions. um, so normally I'm fishing, but I didn't have a fishing pole. Went back, bought a fishing pole, came back, and my skill's not high enough to fish here. So I'm sorry for being a failure of a fisherman, but I'll pretend I'm fishing here. Here's my. I'm showing
All
off my
right.
fishing pole. It's just use your imaginations, everybody.
You're scouting future fishing locations.
Yeah. So let's talk about first just how you got into video games in general. Like way back, what's the first ever video game system or console you played?
Oh gosh, that I played. It's got to be Pong, believe it or not.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like I don't even remember what system that was on. It was like, yeah, basically all it had was Pong on it. That was my first video game at home when I was very young. And then after that, I didn't have consoles, but my dad did. He was a civil engineer, and so he worked with computers a lot back in the early days. And he had a home computer that was an Apple II Plus, and I mean, we found all kinds of games to play on that. And so I'm an old, Apple gamer from way
Oh yeah.
back, and fell in love with the Ultima series, and had lots and lots of old games. Eventually, the gold box D&D games, Pool of Radiance on, and then which led to the Black Isle games and all kinds of great RPGs. So yeah,
How
way
about
back.
the first time you ever played a Blizzard game?
A Blizzard game was Warcraft Orcs and Humans, and then I played the second game, the second Warcraft game, Warcraft 2, and it was also so good. And that was the first time that I actually paid attention to who made the game. I was so impressed that I was like, well, I have to buy all the games made by this company. What company is it? And this is back when you're a kid, um, like it's when you're watching a movie, you don't know who any of the actors are and you don't care. All you care about is the characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not till you're older that you sort of realize, oh, yeah, it's that actor. I'm going to start watching his movies
Yeah.
or her movies, right? So it was kind of a transition for me because, yeah, it was the first time I paid attention to who was actually making these things. So, yeah, my love for that company goes way back as well. And then
So
they were pretty local.
where were
And I
you
was,
living at the time? Was it like an hour away or something, or like even closer?
yeah, I was about 15, 30 minutes away. So,
Oh wow.
Southern California, when they were sort of in Irvine or thereabouts. And I was a little bit south of there. So, yeah, I grew up pretty close to them. And yeah, like I was in another job, and that job came to an end. And I was roommates with Pat Nagel. Many of you know as Nat Pagel.
Yep.
And he's been one of my oldest, he's one of my oldest friends. And he was working there in customer support and said, you know enough about computers. Why don't you come down and, you know, interview for a tech support job, and that's what I did. And I got hired there to do phone support and email support and online support. And from there, I got onto the WoW team.
Well, what would you do in phone support? 'Cause that's kind of interesting, just like being phone support for a company like Blizzard, especially back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day, it was a lot of like the game won't run because people were calling from older computers or they hadn't updated their drivers like ever, you know.
Yeah.
um, and you know the internet wasn't as um, available to a lot of people, and people weren't as savvy about finding things on the internet. So a lot of times, like if you wanted new drivers, you had to like send away for a floppy, right? And they
Oh
would
yeah.
they would mail you a floppy with the updated driver. So that's if you can even find out, you know, what kind of card you had, and you know, like most people had no idea back in the day. What, there are drivers? You know, there are software updates for my hardware. You know, like that was all crazy talk. So, and this is despite the fact that Blizzard had really low system requirements for a lot of their games. But yeah, it still happened. So a lot of it was just, yeah, update your drivers kind of thing because the
Yeah.
game was crashing and that kind of thing. But
It's like
then
the
I got
turn it off and
into,
on again.
yeah, then I got into Diablo 2 support, which had a problem with characters on accounts that were getting uh, delinked from their accounts. So you'd
Mm.
be playing one day and then accidentally logged in the next day and your character was gone. And yeah, people were pretty upset about that. So,
As
um,
I would imagine they would be.
right. So I did a lot of that. It was like a manual reconnect basically for each person. And that was fun. So,
Did you I was gonna mention that Pagel. Did you like learn that he was really into fishing or anything, or did he like fishing at all, or did they just kind of brand that onto him just because?
yeah, he wasn't a fisherman at all. That was just like a joke that Alex Afrasiabi pulled on Pat and just said, "I'm gonna, you know, without him knowing, he's gonna make him the angler, the master angler, right?"
Yeah.
And Nat Pagel was born. So that happened quite a bit. You know, like all the vanity things that go into the game. Most of the time, you find out after it's already in the game, right?
Yeah.
So
I'd imagine
um,
that's probably one of the most well-known ones.
yeah, for sure.
Are there
And
any
then
other ones that come to your mind?
he got into fishing after, you know, because there was, you know, so much pressure on him to actually be a fisherman, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
he got into it later in life. It was pretty funny. But what are some other good ones? Most of the Watchers in Darkshire are all named after employees. So I'm
Oh,
in there, Watcher Jordan, and one of the developers I co-stream with on my stream, Christine Brownell, is Watcher Brownell, and there's I mean, just about everyone there is an employee. So
that's really
uh,
cool.
yeah, we're part of the Night's Watch. So our watch begins, and 15 years later, we're called back into service
Yep.
to fight Stitches again. So
Um, so after you did your support job, what was your
mhm.
first thing you did moving on to the actual like design team?
So the first thing was it was pretty early on, so they were still kind of figuring out what the game was going to include, what it was going to be, you know, what it was going to be, what it was going to try to offer, what it wasn't going to offer. And so I remember writing up on this whiteboard just every system that we wanted in the game, right? Like we need character classes, we need dungeons, we need a trade system, we need PvP, we need um, you know, do we have an auction house? What kind of social systems like guilds? Like we just wrote down all the things that were going to be jam packed into this game, and then we drew a line down the middle basically. And Eric Dodds and I split the two lists. Right, we just basically horse traded over who was going to do what in terms of like fleshing out what they were. So that was kind of my first thing, believe it or not. Like as a junior designer, never worked on a video game. I was fortunate enough to be in a position, and they trusted me enough to, you know, here, just take half the systems in the game, and let's talk them through and figure out what they're going to be, flesh them out. So it was pretty daunting, but also very exciting because I had been playing MMOs for several years by that point and had absolutely fallen in love with the genre. So I couldn't have been happier to be in the position I was in.
What was the first design element you got to work with then?
Gosh, it's hard to remember which specific one. I remember talking about spawning, like we were creating zones and we were figuring out how to spawn them, like what kinds of things would appear, like how densely we would spawn them. So it's kind of determining the play patterns of, is it going to play like EverQuest? Is it going to play like Diablo? Like which kind of determines, how you spawn things.
Mm-hmm.
What's our combat time going to look like? So how long does it take you basically to kill, a 1v1 fight in something that's your level? Another big thing I was doing was we were sort of talking over the thematics and the gameplay and the look of all the dungeons that we want to do. So we were having all these meetings, and each meeting was for one dungeon, and we originally spec'd out 50 dungeons to do. And we were kind of going through the list one at a time. Okay, here's the dead mines. Here's what's going to be in there. Here's how it's going to look. Here are the core thematics. Here are the bosses you're going to fight.
Mm-hmm.
Narrowing down. What's the storyline here? What's the idea? And so that was really fun. I remember doing that really early as well.
What would you say? Sorry, what would you say? Uh, was your favorite thing you worked on then?
Throughout the project, I mean, I ended up working on the very thing I found to be my favorite, which was classes and talents. Um, I've always loved that part of design. And my second favorite is kind of PvP systems.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to focus on both of those things. And one of my regrets is that not enough like open world PvP systems went into the original game, and it
Mm-hmm.
took a long time for more of that stuff to be included. And part of that is just because we didn't have like a designer focused on that thing specifically. And on the team, I was kind of known as the PvP guy because I was always talking about my experiences from other MMOs that I'd played, especially Ultima Online, where I PvP'd a lot. So um, it sort of became this thing that if I had had time, I would have been working on, but because I didn't have time, because I was working on class and talents and they were taking so much of my time, um, it kind of got just kind of left. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it took a long time for someone, and for us as a team to kind of decide, well, we got to put some more time into this. So it's one of my, the unfortunate production realities that
Yeah.
came about.
It's were there any like concepts for open world PvP that like you knew about or were designing with somebody else or knew somebody was working on that didn't make it into the game? Or
Well,
like what were some of them, I guess?
we talked about big picture stuff, of like, big battlefields and events, basically war events and things like that. But ultimately settled on battlegrounds and an honor system that just encouraged world PvP to happen. And then later on in TBC and onwards, we had the sort of fight over this area, the control point PvP. We
Hmm.
did get the arena, the Gurubashi arena, in, which was great. Um, but yeah, like we just nothing really got very far along because no one was really working on it. Like they didn't get past sort of the lunchtime meeting, ideas that
Yep.
we toss around. Like which is actually interesting because there wasn't really plans very early on. There wasn't really plans for there to be two factions. There was just going to be the one faction, like EQ did it. So one of the things that I sort of wrote this big thing, and I convinced Alan Adham that we need two factions. It's orcs versus humans, where PvP is really important. And then he went around like sort of convincing everybody else. And the way he would do that was sometimes would be to describe like battlefields with catapults and meat wagons and like all the things you'd see in a Warcraft game happening, but there are players, each individual person on the field was a player running around, right? So he would paint this amazing picture, but then we never actually got anyone working on that stuff. And that's sort of it's sort of true with MMO design. There's just so much you want to do, but the realities of how long it takes to build a really good MMO, the time it takes is crazy. So things always hit the cutting room floor. So I'm not surprised that it happened, but also just kind of sad, because we
Yeah.
did have some big ideas.
I know one of the things that didn't make it in was there's like an Azshara battleground, because I know there's that little
Yes,
path leading up to it. What was that
right.
one?
That was supposed to be basically a reskinned Alterac Valley, essentially.
Mm.
Because we talked about, like, well, now that we've done this battleground, we should have, like the winter map version of that or the summer map version of that,
Oh yeah.
to give some variety to the queue, right? And there'd
Hmm.
also be some variety in the gameplay, but it would be based on roughly the same battleground experience. And we shelved it because we realized, well, we'd rather just put in a different type of battleground. I think that would go a lot further when it comes to entertaining the audience, right? So
Hmm.
instead of doing a Jara Crater, we did Arathi Basin.
Ah, I see.
So it was kind of one or the other, and we thought Arathi Basin was the better choice.
Yeah. I mean, it probably was, because I mean,
Right.
most people would probably play it and be like, "This is the same thing."
Right.
So.
So it would have been nice, obviously, to have both, but yeah, a lot of times you got to pick one. So,
Hmm.
and yeah,
Um.
the crater has remained unmade to this day, right?
Yep. That would be cool if they actually tried to bring it back or something,
Mm-hmm.
especially with like remaking of classic WoW if they like
Yeah.
decided to throw it in.
And I understand they're going to do a legacy version in retail of, Alterac Valley. So,
Oh yeah.
um, an Ajara crater would be pretty sick.
Yeah, I would love that. So in terms of class design, where do you
Mm-hmm.
even start when you work on class design? Like I don't even know where I would begin.
Well, we Blizzard always tended to begin at what's the competition doing, right? Let's look at
Hmm.
all the character classes and systems that other MMOs have done that we've liked and things that we haven't liked and things we think we can improve upon. So, and for a lot of the team, EverQuest was a huge influence and inspiration to why WoW was even being started in the first place.
Hmm.
But I came from more PvP centric games. So I came from Ultima Online, which didn't really have classes, they just had skills. Uh, but then I also played like Dark Age of Camelot and Lord of the Rings and Warhammer and, a bunch of other games.
Hmm.
And I love the class design. So we basically handpicked a lot of the templates that we really liked. Like we knew we wanted a stealth class, we knew we wanted a range class, we wanted a shape shifting class, we wanted a pet class, and we were going to need tanks and we are going to need healers and DPS. And so you sort of start with the framework of what kinds of classes do you want, what kind of gameplay do you want to fulfill, and then you balance that against the thematics of like all the previous Warcraft games, like what kinds of units or champions or heroes are people going to want to play coming from those games. Like, I want to play an Orc Blade Master, right? So how do we make that essentially? Or I want to play, an Archmage. How do we make that? So how do we translate that into, a character class experience in WoW? So that's sort of where the two started, or the two kind of big approaches to determine where we were going to start.
What were some classes that you were gonna do that didn't actually make the cut? Kind of like the battleground, where you're like,
Oh, right.
it'd be
Yeah.
fun, but we can't do this.
There was a Rune Master class idea, which was an unarmed class. So that the monk class or unarmed fighter was a popular one in a lot of games. And then there was also the Necromancer class, which EQ had just done, which had a history in Warcraft, but we didn't want to copy EverQuest directly. And the other thing was a mix of staples and what I've been terming like the freak class, which is just very different from what everyone else has done. Most games have like one or two character classes that just sound different or have a weird thematic. You don't know what to expect when you're getting into it. So we wanted to do at least one of those classes. And so the freak class slot basically came down to the Rune Master, the Warlock, or potentially the Necromancer. The Necromancer wasn't very freaky. Like most people knew what they were getting with that, and EverQuest had already done it. And so the Warlock, which filled that same slot, caster pet class, but was very different and also had a great history in Warcraft. So that one sort of beat out the Rune Master to fill that slot. So yeah, the Rune Master got sidelined, and they didn't actually get an unarmed class until the monk came along much later. But yeah, so that was one of the templates that didn't make it into the game, was an unarmed class.
What did the Rune Master do?
So the Rune Master was an unarmed fighter who would also cast runes. He would like inscribe them on his body, on his fists, sometimes in the air or on the ground, to create magical effects and buffs and enhancements and things like that. So the concept didn't get very far because it was very rough. Like, is this something that we want to do? And then once we decided to do the Warlock, the whole thing, the progress on the Rune Master was halted. So
yeah, that's actually crazy. When did talent trees come along in the whole process?
Pretty late, actually. So talent trees, the original need for talent trees, or the design hole that we wanted to fill, essentially was how does a player who is a specific character class distinguish himself from all the other guys that are also playing that class? Once you're a warrior, are you interchangeable with every other warrior running around, right? And we wanted to make sure players had a really good way of differentiating themselves. So that was like the original need for the talents. And then thematically, it was also to sort of expand what is kind of a generic class at the start into a more specific thematic, right? So again, I mentioned the Blade Master. We didn't want to make the character class called the Blade Master. We wanted to make it a warrior, and then based on your talent choices and your gear choices and all the other things, you would sort of transform it into what you ultimately wanted it to be, whether that was in the style of like a demon hunter or a blade master or a mountain king or whatever it was. And that was like, well, if I'm a blade master, I'm going to go arms and use a big two-handed sword. So I'll have two-handed sword spec and that kind of thing. Be an orc. If I want to be a mountain king, I'm a dwarf warrior that, probably goes fury and has dual wield, right? With hammer and axe, right? So the talent trees were great at helping players sort of differentiate themselves and complete the sort of thematic concept that they went into the game wanting to create. So, and for a lot of people, that's really important, like that's sort of the starting point of the experiences. I picture Conan, or I picture Aragorn, or I picture Gandalf, or whatever. I want to try to make that character. And how do I go about that? So giving players a starting point and then an end point and allowing them to fill in the blanks with their creativity was really important to us.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of my favorites, like, things about classic WoW is you do get that kind of cookie cutter creativity, and it's like every time you level up, you get a point to put into that creativity. And I think that's one of the things even retail WoW lacks a bit, because you don't get it every level. It's like every 15 levels you can be creative.
Right. It's funny too, because internally we used to argue about that quite a bit, like the value of that 1 point per level, because like you don't actually feel, because the big arguments were like you don't notice the difference between another 1% mana, right? And you're
Mm-hmm.
sinking 5 levels worth of points. And so, but there is something psychological about just, oh, I went up a level, sweet, I get to add to my character. And again, I'm progressing towards this ultimate, goal that I have in mind, and I can't wait to get there. And there's just lots of little mini celebrations every level.
Yeah,
So,
it was like
um,
one of those things where it could be like you get to pick a color and be like, "Oh, I picked green," and it could be like
right.
nothing matters with that at all. But you're
Yeah.
like, "I
Doesn't
did
give you
it."
any bonuses. Right.
Yeah.
Makes me look cool though. Yeah. So I think there was a disconnect at some point between how valuable, just that one little choice, even though you couldn't feel it on your character, was, versus what, like you were saying, what you have now, which is you don't get to make a meaningful choice until you wait 15 levels. So yeah, pretty important as it turns out.
Yep. Um, and I hope they actually change that because I don't know if they have any plans to, but it would be nice.
Yeah, we'll see. That is the hope, I think, is that Classic makes them look at various things a second time,
Mm-hmm.
with a different perspective. And um, I think many people are expecting or hoping that some of those classic philosophies get re-injected into the retail experience.
Yeah, because that's the biggest thing I've noticed is it is a slower paced, more RPG focused game
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to retail, which is kind of like all over the place hack and slash
Right. Yeah, it
run
feels more
around.
Diablo-like, right?
Yeah, and
And
so
Diablo-like is really fun, but yeah, I think
yeah.
MMOs as a genre are sort of based in that I spend time in this place, I live in this world, I have friends in this world, and everything is more meaningful because it's not just jump in, shoot a bunch of things, jump out. It's
Mm.
I experience it, and it's going on whether I'm there or not. When I'm not playing, I'm missing it.
Mm.
Things are going on, and I want to be a part of it. So it's a very different feeling
It
than
definitely
most
is.
other games in the market, right?
Hmm. Um, so when you are like trying to design classes, you
Mm-hmm.
obviously have to take into account just balance. Like, is there anything
Yeah.
you were gonna give something like a mage or like another class where you had to take it away because you're like, nah, that's too powerful, or give someone something else because you're like, oh, it's not good enough.
Yeah, the mage is a great example, and also a very topical example.
Yeah.
um, But yeah, believe it or not, there were things that we didn't allow the mage to have. Invisibility is an example. It's like because when you think of any effect, well, can a mage do that? And it's like, well, of course, it's just a spell, right? You can imagine anything as a spell that a mage could do, right? So
Hmm.
um, the answer is almost always yes. But when we started working up invisibility, it was like, well, yeah, but this is stepping on the toes of rogues, right? Stealth and being hidden and bypassing content. These are all very rogue-like things. And so now we have this spell he just kind of turns on at will, and I'm just as good as a rogue at these things, right? So
Yeah.
ultimately, we had to kill the idea, and it was one that we kept trying to get in because it is a cool idea, but there was a bar where we had to make sure we didn't sort of cross this line of like stepping on the rogue's toes and stealing his thunder, and also how is it different than the way the rogue goes about doing his stealth thing. So yeah, and I can't imagine a world where the mage has invisibility like in classic. Right?
Yeah.
It's just
Well, it
absurd.
did it get in Burning Crusade or Wrath? I don't remember which
Yeah,
one.
we eventually added one that was like short term, and but it didn't really. It wasn't a great execution just because then the reaction by the like dungeon designers was just to put detect and viz on a ton of dudes in the
Yeah.
dungeon, right? So it didn't really accomplish the goals, right? All it made the level designers do was harden against it. So
Hmm.
I'm sure it had its, people had fun with it, but yeah, not a great execution on the idea.
Uh, I'm curious about druids because that's always the
Hmm.
class people be like, "Oh, I want to play a druid," and everyone's like, "No,
Right,
don't play druid. They're just like the jack of all trades, master of none." So like,
right,
if
right.
like, what was your was that kind of what they were supposed to be, or like if you could go back, were there things you would change with them?
Yeah, so they were supposed to be exactly that, the jack of all trades, master of none, and be able to do all of the things um, at pretty high levels at the same time, which was something that most other classes couldn't do, right? Because like
Mm-hmm.
when you fully spec'd a rogue, well, he was DPS. He wasn't going to heal you ever, and he wasn't going to tank anything. Like
Mm-hmm.
short-term evasion tanking notwithstanding. Um, and a warrior, even a warrior who could theoretically DPS and tank, isn't really doing both at the same time when they're fully spec'd against difficult content. So the druid was going to be able to do like multiple roles, be shape shifting a bunch, even in one individual fight, but kind of be coming in at 90% on all the different things. So that was the original idea, but what we learned pretty early on was that just doesn't cut it because people don't want that. They want 100% performers in each of the roles and those slots to be filled. So they'd much rather have that than a guy that can perform two or three roles, in one fight at a 90% level. So the versatility isn't valued very highly at all. So we learned that sort of 10% hybrid tax on the druid um, was just killing the class. So we had to adjust and essentially make him choose what he was going to be, based on his talent choices and gear and all that stuff. So he ended up being a lot more like other classes in terms of role output. And so yeah, we had to change that up, but it took a while. So
Hmm. Um, I'm curious about if you were gonna put in like a different type of talent tree for PvP, because I know you said how into PvP
mhm.
you were. Like, was there ever the thought of having like one PvE talent tree and then another for PvP?
No, and it's funny because a lot of people think that way. That was the intention of the design because that's sort of how it worked out. But
Mm.
my goal was always to make sure that all 27 specs were viable, exciting, and different in all of the different ways you could play the game, whether it was PvP, PvE, soloing, groups, raiding, like
Mm.
it's basically just this giant canvas, and then you piece together based on what your play style was, what you needed to get various jobs done. And then um, if you were Moneybags McGee, then you could respec as often as you wanted to make sure you were over specialized in every little thing you were doing. So, um, but yeah, the intent was always that I wouldn't tell you how to play the game based on your spec, and I also wouldn't tell you how to spec based on how you were playing the game. So you could spec however you wanted in terms of thematic. You still had to make good choices within that thematic to accomplish your goals in whatever gameplay you were doing. But I didn't set like specific rules like, okay, Shadow's going to be the priest PvE tree or PvP tree, and Holy's going to be their PvE tree. That's not what I set out to do. So, but setting out to do a thing and actually hitting the mark obviously are very different things.
Mm.
And we dropped the ball on several specs in some areas. But all in all, I think considering the size of the job, when I compare myself or compare the game to a lot of other games, I think we did a pretty decent job when it comes to balancing stuff.
Yeah, I would definitely say so as well. I mean, even like specking as a warlock, like I never played a
Mm-hmm.
warlock back in the day, so I was like, oh, I'll do it for classic WoW, like here.
Right.
And it was really fun, and I just was like, oh, I'll go affliction, and then I ended up
Mm-hmm.
doing drain tanking just because that's how I enjoyed it. The only
Right.
thing that I was like, that talent was meh, was the Dark Pact for
Okay. Yeah.
the mana, 'cause it's like it is nice to get a little extra mana, but I was like, I don't know if it's like my end of affliction talent tree.
Right. Right. It didn't feel
So
strong enough as a capstone
yeah.
because
So
basically you want to be most of the time as a DPS class, you want to be destroying somebody with your with your
Yeah.
capstone. So that one's like pure efficiency or engine, which some people get a kick out of. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
most
So
of the time you just want to blow something up.
is there like did you kind of go line by line, or like would you do like based on like class, like all right, today I'm gonna work on affliction and like tomorrow I'm gonna work on holy priest, or like how would you do that?
Um, yeah, it would go back and forth, but we'd have discussions at some points, and then also just like thematics. We'd break down what are the sort of three thematics that we want to entertain in this particular class. For our priest, which is a good example, is like we were trying to do something a little different than what other people had done in the cleric, like in Dungeons and Dragons and EverQuest, and typically it's like the mace swinging, heavy armor healer class or buffer class. But
Mm-hmm.
we wanted ours to be sort of cloth and more, um, sinister in like the mind control kind of like almost like a psionicist. Um, it sort of had that dark edge to him. And so our priests were very different. So we put them in cloth and we gave them a holy and then a shadow and then sort of the in between or utility spec to sort of feed into other potential builds. And then, so once you come up with the sort of thematics, then you try to figure out what's the gameplay impetus here for each of them. And for Shadow, it was about DPS at the cost of being a great healer. For Holy, it was pretty much straight healing and Holy Fire and things like that. Damage through Holy, and then Discipline was more about prevention, damage prevention, Power Word Shield being key, and then lots of utility and more, another buff and things like that. So it's sort of a like two-pronged approach. We call it top down and bottom up. Bottom up is sort of the mechanical needs and the place you're trying to get, and top down is sort of the thematic approach of, and then you try to get those two things to meet in the middle to make a really good design.
Oh, that is a cool way to do it. Um, One thing I wanted to ask about talent trees
Mm-hmm.
was I know, I think I watched someone's video or something, and it was like they data mined like the alpha, or they got like an alpha build. I don't know what they did, but it was like the
Right.
talent trees used to have like different, like it used to have like a billion talents for like everything, and
Yes.
then that, like, what was that?
Yeah, that was Eric Dodds actually took the first crack at a talent system, and it was really, really open ended in terms of here are just a ton of different things, and we're just going to give you points. And it was all sort of, it was a pretty flat, like tree essentially, rather than a tree that you go down. It was just really flat in terms of what can I take. I can take the starter talent of any of these things, and then I have to spend more points to specialize further. So essentially, like you could take strength 1, which is +1 strength, and then that would cost you 10 points. And then you could take strength 2 for 30 points, and it would give you another 2 strength, right? So you were sort of having to decide between making my character really very well rounded or very specialized, but you could mix and match anything you wanted. You could do strength and nature resistance, and then plus damage against beasts, right? Like those could be your 3 things that you focused on and spent
Hmm.
all your points on. Or you could go a totally different approach of I'm a better healer and I have plus int and I have a ton of spell crit. Those are my 3 things.
I see.
Um, so it was really open ended, but didn't have like a lot of the gameplay punch that you would see later in the talent trees. They also weren't designed specifically for the classes, so they had a lot less character in terms of names and thematics and things like that. So it was super open ended, which is really great for all the people that like to be really creative, trying to find cool combos and things like that. But it didn't. It wasn't very strong thematically, and it didn't solve the problem of or accomplish one of the goals we were trying to accomplish which was helping like a warrior become a blade master, right?
Mm-hmm.
because there wasn't really anything in there that was so definitively like Blade Master, that people felt like, oh yeah, this is accomplishing that goal. So a lot of the thematics behind each individual choice were very dry.
I see. Yeah, it doesn't feel as simplified, I guess, either.
Mm-hmm.
As maybe
Right.
the actual game
Yeah, it's
has
also
right
just
now.
a giant list, so it didn't present well. Like we could have had a better UI for it eventually, but the talent trees are a great presentation on this idea. Oh, I'm going to be this thing. I'm going to be an assassination rogue. Um, what do I get from these? And then you have lots of pretty icons and a nice looking backdrop on the talent page, and the presentation is just much better than like a list of things you can buy.
Yeah, I always loved the presentation of the talent trees.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what are some of your favorite things about the game that you didn't work on?
That I didn't work on. I thought the quest guys did amazing work in like the quest system. The quest system is ultimately is designed to direct your gameplay, right? Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I've got a quest. It's sending me to this zone to go fight these creatures, and along the way, I'm going to see these things. I'm going to collide with other players potentially. I'm going to fight in this area that's different than the last quest where it sent me to a different area, right? So its purpose is very simple, but a lot of the quests were also just really fun in and really cool in the writing sense and the gameplay that they created. So did a great job of not just go here, do this, come back, but also creating experiences that went way beyond that. So they did an amazing job. And then the other is just the level design, the world design, the dungeon design, all just. I mean, this world is so packed with beautiful places to visit, and Blackrock Depths is one of my favorite dungeons, and I mean that place is just a masterpiece.
Oh yeah, I actually just ran that like 2 days ago.
Yeah, I
Come to
mean
think,
it's just a huge, fun adventure zone, and there's so many different ways to approach it, and there's so many things to do within it. Um, and it just feels like so much more than just a dungeon. So,
mm-hmm.
um, yeah, they just did an amazing job. I mean, I could go on and on and on about other people
Yeah,
that worked on the game that I had nothing to do with, that made WoW what it is, basically, which is just very high marks in every category when it comes to an MMO. Where a
it's
lot of games, it's like, yeah, you get 8 out of 10 in a lot of areas, and there's a couple things that are like 4, and it's like,
yeah,
but WoW basically hit 8s and 9s and 10s across the board.
it's one of those things where even the little things stand out a lot. Like it just
Yeah.
started raining in Stranglethorn, and one of my
Oh,
favorite things
nice.
even back then was just the weather effects getting added in because it
Yeah,
gave you
yeah,
that extra immersion.
yeah. Yeah, and it was such a passion project for so many people too, that nothing was good enough, and like every ounce of each individual developer went into making this the very best thing it could be. So no one was on the team and just be like, yeah, it's a fun job, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
um, it was just a work of absolute love, and it shows in just every little thing.
I think even with questing, like a lot of people might try questing now that have played like retail WoW and they never grew up with
Hmm.
classic WoW, and they might be like, oh,
Right.
these quests are just, kill bears, get bear asses,
Yeah.
walk around. But it's like, for the time, that was like revolutionary compared to like
Right.
other games doing the same thing.
Yeah, the quest system, the quest tools they have available in retail now are much stronger and more diverse. Um, but at the same time, Classic was just much more experimental. It was much more wide open. Like they had quests where they just sent you places and you had no idea what to do. Um, when you finish Wailing Caverns, you get a gem, and there's just like, find someone that knows about this, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay. And you happen to run into somebody, and I won't spoil what area, but and then you're just like, wow, that's crazy. And then he chats with you and sends you to a different place. Like you actually read the quest text and you get involved in it, and so that we took risks more often, and that led to a more diverse types of experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now it's like, okay, you get the quest, you're going to go to this particular area, they send you right to that area, you're going to do X of Y,
Yeah, it shows it
and
on your mini map.
right, you're done and you get back, right? So they stick to sort of the formula that um, some would argue, players would argue, is the better formula, but as a game designer, I think we've lost a lot of that experimental sort of take players out of their comfort zone sometime, and it will
Mm-hmm.
enhance their experience, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things we've gotten away from is like just making people, learn things on their own. Like going into
Yeah.
BRD and being like,
Mhm.
oh, we have to go this way. We have to like hit the levers so we don't get locked out. And we have to like
Right,
do all
right.
these things instead of just like, if that happened in like a retail WoW, people'd be going crazy, being like, this dungeon
Right.
is dumb.
Right. How
So,
dare you waste my time? Yeah.
yeah. But you can buy the paid DLC to skip it.
Right.
So I think
Yeah,
just that's
it's like
a
going it's like going to an escape room and spending an extra 20 for him to give you the key. It's like,
yeah.
oh, all right, I did it.
Yeah, it's I think that's what a lot of people are hoping is that this does impact retail WoW because obviously it's changed and I don't think it's going to go back to what it was. I think, but I do think they can go in a different direction that'll make it a little better
Yeah,
than
for sure.
what it's at right now.
Yeah, just it just takes commitment and a decision that's what they want to do, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
is not necessarily a foregone conclusion, right? They might
Mm-hmm.
they might just keep trying to have retail serve the retail people and classic serve the classic people, and I'm not sure I believe that the two audiences are as different as people say. I think at the end of the day, most people just want a really good game, and there is a place where we can get, because classic could use some UI improvements, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are things about classic um, that can be improved. I mean, look at all the content, right?
Yeah.
Classic could use a lot more content. We're all playing 15-year-old content because we like the gameplay, but what we'd really like to see is brand new content in the same style of classic, right? The same philosophies of classic. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then retail, has that, but has lost a little bit in the gameplay department, depending on who you ask. But so there's things that both games can gain from the other, but yeah, I think at the end of the day, most people just want a really good MMO to play.
Yeah, I think what kind of made me not think retail is going in a great direction was probably the Warlords of Draenor when they
Okay.
did the whole like garrison
Mhm.
phone, like play on your phone, do everything from your garrison, because
right.
it just discouraged going out into the world. And it's like,
Yeah.
what's like the whole point of the game is just going out. And obviously they went
Yeah.
away from that, but
And that was if you want an example of a major system that was never implemented, it was housing, because garrisons were kind of the housing idea as far as we had gotten. But yeah, I consider the garrison idea to kind of be a failure, and I think a lot of people at Blizzard would agree. And all it was basically our old housing idea, and we made sure that we didn't implement that because it didn't fit. It didn't work in the MMO idea. So,
mhm.
and we had a very high bar. Like, if we're going to work on this thing, it has to fit. It has to be amazing. It has to support all the other systems and all the other mechanics and all the other things going on in this experience. And it just never did. So we never added it. Later on, they added it, and in the form it was in, it kind of behaved how we worried it would behave, which was taking people out of the world and giving you your own private place to play your own game, but it's not a single player game.
Yeah. That's why I always thought I got ganked right now, so I'm just laying here dead.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. I always thought it'd be cool if I think Final Fantasy does this, but with like guild player housing, where like you could have multiple
Yes.
people kind of in that, because then it would
Yeah.
encourage people interacting, and that's the whole point.
Right. Yeah, I think if garrisons had been a guild thing instead of a solo thing, they would have been it would have been much closer to a successful system because you would have seen your guildies running by all the time. You'd had shared goals. You would have been socializing. Um, there would have been a lot of other elements that fed into that experience
Mm-hmm.
rather
Yeah,
than
even like killing a
each person
boss and like
within the
hanging it
guild.
on your wall or
Yeah,
something.
exactly. Like that kind of stuff people love. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, instead of taking every single person out of the experience to do their own thing.
Mm-hmm. And I think I always still love like the first month or two of an expansion release, and I think it's
Hmm.
because all your friends are playing, like you're
Yeah.
exploring this new world again. You're like, I don't know what
Right.
this is. You're running around, and then I think once that kind of settles in, and everyone's like, all
Hmm.
right, now you gotta farm Azurite, you gotta
Right.
farm
Right.
these and do that, and it's like, oh well, then it just
Yeah.
kind of falls off.
Once you see the treadmill, you're like, not worth it.
Yeah. Like one of my favorite experiences from BFA was just farming a hyena mount. And there'd be
Oh,
some people
nice.
like, oh, I got 2 in 5 minutes. And I'm like, I've been farming this for 20 hours.
Right.
so,
Right.
so there's a
Yeah.
lot of that
Yeah.
in Classic WoW even, where it's like, oh, I got the Helcular's Rod in like 1 kill. And I'm like, I've been here for killing 150 Yetis and I still don't
Right.
have.
Right.
So,
Yeah, it's rough. Yeah, that's another thing. It's designed to artificially keep people playing, but it backfires more often than not.
yeah.
Um, Only the people with like the highest thresholds for grind are gonna stay and enjoy and do that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is a place for that kind of mechanic. Like I never liked rep grinds, but I was okay putting them in because I knew that there was an audience for it that wanted to just grind their faces off and get that some mount or some cosmetic thing or some special weapon that only they had or very few people had because they had grind their face off, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like gameplay, I think that's a pretty small percentage of people that are willing to do that. So for the rest of people, you kind of have to make sure that the game is fun moment to moment. And yeah, because the rep grind, you could argue, is not fun moment to moment. Killing, you know,
Furbolgs for
yeah, furbolgs forever, right? The actual
yeah.
kill of a furball, not very exciting, right?
Yep.
But the very end is exciting, so yeah, it's the difference between like WoW is a moment to moment gameplay type of experience, and WoW is like a treadmill experience.
Mm-hmm. So what are just some of your favorite memories working on just World of Warcraft in general, or even just any Blizzard memories working at Blizzard?
Um, I used to love we used to rent out movie theaters and go see movies together. That was really fun. One example that was amazing was back when we were still a pretty small company, we went to see the Dungeons and Dragons movie,
Oh wow.
and we almost filled the theater, but didn't quite. And so it was like 90% Blizzard and then like 10% just random people who had no idea they were surrounded by a bunch of Blizzard people. And there was one seat like in the middle next to a non-Blizzard person. And Mike Morheim walked in and everybody gave him a standing ovation for some reason. I don't even remember why, but for whatever reason, everybody just stood up and started clapping when he came in. And then Mike went and sat down in this one empty seat next to this random person. And the guy was just like, what is happening? Right? Like, who are you?
Yeah.
It was just so good. And then, of course, we just laughed hysterically at Dungeons and Dragons,
Yeah.
all cheered when Smalls died. And, like, so good, right? That was a fond memory. Another huge memory for me was the Fry signing the night that WoW went live. We basically went to Fry's Electronics, and a bunch of the developers sat in tables, and we signed boxes that people had bought. Covered their boxes with our signatures, and there were just thousands of people there, and people had come from pretty far and wide. Like we it was in Southern California, and people would come from Canada, people would come from the East Coast, some people from Europe, just to be at this signing event, which just blew our minds. So, and they were all also, most of them, giving up the opportunity to log into the servers when they actually went live because the event went really long. So, yeah, the truly hardcore. It was pretty amazing though. Great time. People were basically tailgating in the parking lot all day beforehand, cooking in their, portable barbecues and just hanging out and wearing their For the Horde or For the Alliance shirts. And it was just a great time. It was an amazing experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's I feel like those are probably the best moments you get where other companies, probably didn't do that type of thing.
Oh, right. Yeah. The release thing is pretty, it was pretty mind-blowing too, on just how excited people were, like, because we never really knew, like, we had all kinds of plans for if it's only this successful versus this successful. And I think most of our plans were like, if it has 100,000, great, we can work with that. If it has 250, great, because EverQuest had about 600K, and that was the best anyone had ever done in terms of concurrent subs. And so most of our sort of models, were between 100,000 and 500,000, right? Like 500,000 was ridiculously successful to us. And, the Fries event sort of helped us, got over that first hump of, is this going to be a fun thing? Is this going to be well received,
Mm-hmm.
Or are we in trouble, because it took so much money and so much time to make this thing. So pretty great. Also just it helped calm the nerves, and it was testament to how excited people were to jump in and play. So that was great.
Yeah. So we've been going for about an hour, so I'm gonna start wrapping it up. But
sounds good.
Where can people find you if they want to check you out? Because I know you live stream.
I do. I'm a Twitch streamer now, full time, and I can be found at twitch.tv/Kevin Jordan. It's just my name, very easy, hopefully. And yeah, I've been playing a ton of classic WoW. I stream at least 5 times a week, sometimes more. And come on by, ask questions, say hello. Even the Alliance are welcome. That's fine too.
Except the one that ganked me again.
That's right. Centaurs are not welcome. If you're a centaur, stay at home. But other than that, come on by, say hello. Love to chat with you.
Awesome. And Blood Bowl. Maybe you'll play some Blood Bowl.
Yeah, and also, my YouTube channel has tons of old Blood Bowl games. So
yeah, I mean, we have like a Blood Bowl league we start up every couple months. So, I mean, if you wanted to join that,
it does sound awesome.
I'd definitely give you an invite.
All right, cool.
Yeah. So thanks again for joining me, and
my pleasure.
It was great just hearing about. Yeah, no problem. It was great just hearing all these old little classic WoW details that you don't normally get to hear.
Yeah. It's fun to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope all you guys are enjoying Crendor's fishing program and also classic WoW. It's just been amazing since it's been back. All the people enjoying it and saying hello and just having a good time again. It's so nice to have such a huge audience for WoW, even so long after its initial release. So it's good times.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, I can't believe 15 years later, it's like we're all just playing it again.
That's right. Stuff most of us have done before, and here we are.
Yep. All right. Well, I never know how to end these, so I'm just going to end it. Click subscribe and hit the bell. I don't even know how YouTube works anymore.
Yeah, just do those things.
Yeah, just do those things.
Just do it.
All right.
Thanks, Crendor. I really appreciate it.
See ya.